Literature and author conversation. We're very excited to be here this evening and for you to join us today. Through this series, we hope to engage the audience through chat dialogue, strategic questions, and learning through literature regarding culture, history, indigeneity, and the complexities of life. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual discussion made possible in part thanks to funding from the Rhode Island State Council on the Humanities, Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, the New England Foundation for the Arts, USDA Rural Development, and people like you. You too can support programs like this by making a tax-deductible donation to Tamaquag Museum. Haley, our wonderful Tamaquag tech, will put the chat in the link. Just a quick reminder before we get started, please make sure you're all on mute. Please engage with us using the chat box to type in your questions and we'll add them into the conversation. We will have time to take additional live questions and comments at the end of the author conversation. Use your reaction buttons to let us see your enthusiasm. If you're having any technical trouble, use the chat box to private message Tamaquag Tech for assistance. Before we would begin, I would just like to take a minute to introduce myself and do a land acknowledgement. You can also acknowledge the land you're on. If you know the nation, put it in the chat. If not, you can use the tool nativeland.ca or check out our guide to land acknowledgements if you work for an organization that wants to make a more in-depth land acknowledgement. Askawi Kwasin, Natasawis Makasini Pashao at Nahai Gansek, Natasawis Loren Spears at Englishat, Nin Nahai Gansek Nehantek, Kanupiam at Aki at Nahai Gansek, Kanupiam Wuchi Nitampawag Ka Nitangsawag at Aki at Nahai Gansek. Katabatash Katantwa Wuchi Wunikisa Kawami Nawianakan Wunitiawank. Thank you, Creator, for the beautiful day and the beauty that surrounds us. Hello, everyone. I am Loren Spears. I'm the Executive Director of Tamaquag Museum, and I am Narragansett Niantic, and welcome friends and relatives to the homelands of the Narragansett Nation. And again, I thank you for being here. But as I welcome you and bless this day, we must acknowledge 400 years of conquest, colonization, genocide, land dispossession, enslavement, forced assimilation, detribalization, and erasure of the Narragansett and other indigenous nations of the Americas. We also must acknowledge the bravery, resilience, perseverance, and adaptability of our ancestors who ensured our continuation, passing forth our traditional ecological knowledge, language, history, culture, while contributing to the creation of this colony, state, and country. There is no U.S. history without Indigenous peoples' history. And there is no Rhode Island history without Narragansett, Niantic, and other Indigenous peoples' history. This is our homeland since time immemorial, documented for more than 20,000 years. We are still here. May we always remember, we are the land. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. We must care for Mother Earth to ensure our future generations. A land acknowledgement is just the beginning. It must be followed by actions. That is why we established the Indigenous Empowerment Network and represent the museum exhibits and programs from a first-person perspective. Katabatash Akwane Ka Nantam. Thanks, peace, and blessings. Now I would like to introduce Chenae Bullock. So happy that you are here. She is Shinnecock and a community leader, a water protector, a culture preservationist, Indigenous perspective historian, and humanitarian. Beyond her work as a published author, Chenae has been employed in various Indigenous museums throughout New England, organized community gatherings to paddle the ancient waterways of the Northeast, and has represented her tribal nation on the Mid-Atlantic Committee on the Ocean, working to enhance vitality of the region's ocean ecosystem. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about some of those other things, but we may have to have her back for some of those talks. So I would like you to please join me in welcoming our guest today, Chenae Bullock. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm just doing a little virtual smudge. This is just really awesome. Nadasuwi Sakampanayu Mishuna Tuuskwa, Wachi Shinnecock, Wachi Pamanaki, Wachi Siwanhaki. My given name is Eileen Canoe. I'm Butterfly Woman, and I come from the people of the Stony Shores, the Shinnecock people, as well as a very proud descendant of the Montauk people, which is on the east end of Long Island. We refer to Long Island as Pamanaki, which means fish island. So the next time you look at Long Island, it's in the shape of a fish, of its beautiful cultural landscape. Our sister tribes have referred to Long Island and still refer to it as Siwanhaki, which is the island of shells, because we're really known for our very deep purple quahog shells. So I'm just really excited to be here and to just, share, my experience in the book. And I really love the Tamaqua Museum, and it's just really an honor. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We're so pleased to have you as well. And we're so excited because this year, in this time of healing and renewal, plant medicines are just so vital. And we're so thrilled to not only have you here tonight, but next week in our traditional ecological knowledge walk, which of course is already sold out. So those, sorry if you haven't been one of those that have already signed up. But we are doing others just in case you missed this one from now through the fall. But I think about your title, 50 Plant Medicines, which for me is just such a beautiful way to label that. And I'm just curious about, well, let me back up a bit. You started to, I'm already jumping in, I got sidetracked. You were talking a little bit about your background in your homelands, but I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit more about your background and how you became an author.
So I like to start off by saying I am a military brat. Yes, I am Shinnecock. My mother was born and raised on the Shinnecock Reservation, and then she married my handsome dad, and they went off into the sunset, and we lived all around the world. But one of the things with having a Shinnecock mother is she instilled in me who I was, where I came from. So no matter where we lived, we always had gardens. I've lived in Saudi Arabia, Kamis Mache, and I'll never forget, just being so young, my mom had corn beans and squash gardens. Like, how does that happen in the desert? I guess it took a Shinnecock woman to make it happen. We had sunflowers, as I was so little, but they were definitely giants. So that was one thing I'd have to say, that no matter wherever I lived, I was always learning about, one, who I am, the difference in who I am and the people that I'm around, but also the environment. And every time coming home to Shinnecock, I was always able to see the variations of different plant medicines. The Northeast is bountiful of plant medicines. I mean, the majority of our things that we buy in CVS sometimes have a lot of the plant medicines that grow around our homelands. So as I got older, I started to learn a little bit more in depth about them. Being younger, I was able to identify them. So what really inspired me to write this book was during COVID last year, I was making these mosquito boxes. Mosquito in our language means medicine. And I was gifting them to different people. And which I had like mullein, I had echinacea, elderberries, dandelion, a couple of other things that were really good for the respiratory and immune. And they took off. And I had put a little pamphlet in them just to give people a little bit of background on how to use them, where to identify them, when to harvest them, where they grow. Is it a meadow? Is it a wetland? Is it a prairie? Because sometimes when you're hiking, if you don't know the terrain, you don't know where to look. So I just put a little pamphlet together, and my brother told me in January, he's like, sis, you need to write a book. You're always doing these historical talks and everything. He said, by the click of a button, people should be able to access that, especially during the pandemic. So it challenged me, because I was like, how do I put what I do in a digital format? And so it was, cold winter January night. And I said, you know what? I opened up this Excel spreadsheet, and I started just typing down like 50 plants that I could think of. And then from there, I just wrote a paragraph or maybe a couple of paragraphs about each one. And I just found myself locked in for like a full week. I didn't want to go anywhere. I had my, my sage burning. I had a good movie on. I had some good music. I was, um, I was in a good place. I fasted before I wrote the book, and I just thought about, it's definitely time. So I launched it during my birthday, February 10th. So it took me like about a month to do everything, and as a young author, I just think about, those that have gone before me, some of my elders that may no longer be here, that, when I used to work in different museums, I used to read some of their books and things like that. And I just think about the young kids that listen to me talk, but if I could just leave something for them, they'll always be able to have something. So that's kind of what really inspired me to write my book, and I dedicated it to my brother for challenging me.
Brothers are good at that, aren't they? I think that's so wonderful. I mean, I think, this has been such a tough year, or a year and a half, if you will, for everyone. So to have been inspired during this difficult time on something that is healing, mind, body, spirit, I think that makes that extraordinarily special and exciting. And so you sort of already told us what inspired you to write this book, which is great. So I'm wondering if you might tell me a little bit about the history, because in your title, you also speak to oral history. And since much of the history of Indigenous peoples is rooted in oral tradition, I'm wondering how you think about how you started this project and where your knowledge came from, and how you process through sort of your, I'll call it, research in this process of writing the book.
Well, you know what? That's a great question because I have a little visual for that. So if you don't mind, I could share my screen.
Haley might, the text, I switched hosts. Oh, no, she's got it.
Yep,
Good.
I got it. So I hope you all can see this. Here is a picture of me on our stony shores on Shinnecock. And you can see there's the eelgrass like all around me. And so eelgrass was actually one of those plants that encouraged me to write this book. And with that, growing up, when I was growing up, like sometimes you're being told what it is, like, oh yeah, that's eelgrass, whatever. But it just, when I see it, it just makes me think of home. And eelgrass, to many of you who may not know, is one of those plants that is on the endangered species list because of all the overdevelopment and the coastal flooding. And I don't want to go too far off into the environmental part, but I think you get where I'm going. And, with my tribe, Shinnecock, translating to people of the Stony Shore, I always think about like, well, if something happens to the people of the Stony Shore, then what's going to happen to the Stony Shore? What's going to happen to the eelgrass? The eelgrass that we have around Shinnecock, you can see crabs begin to lay their eggs and nest in there. There's rare sea turtles that come, like, I know that I forgot the name of it. There's one that comes every August new moon, and it comes, lays in its eggs and goes, and it just comes back once a year in that time, every new moon. So if we don't have the habitat for that, then it affects the rest of the ecosystem. It affects the rest of the world. So I was really inspired by eelgrass to really write this book because I felt like I was giving a voice to the voiceless. A lot of people don't know that. These connections that we have with these plants, we know their value to us, right? And even though it says plant medicines, I know, Lauren, and myself and others that might be on here, medicine isn't always something that you just put in a teacup and drink. This is medicine to the earth. This is medicine to our environment. So we are medicine to it by preserving it. So I felt like putting it in a digital format because everybody's digital now, right? Facebook, Instagram, ebook, my ebook, you can get on Amazon, all these different places. But if we're leaving the environment out of the digital world, then we're not taking care of the environment. So this was my way of kind of putting this into a digital format and giving it a voice. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful. I mean, to think about your sense of place as the inspiration and the research, if you will, it's a lifetime of research and knowledge passed down through your elders and ancestors, which is really amazing. Is there anything else that you want to add in that in that section about sort of where your knowledge came from?
Yeah, like I'll share a little bit that's actually not in the book, but it's a story that I have of my mom. So right here, this is kind of, if the camera was turned around to the other side, you would see the Shinnecock Bay, basically. And that kind of floods in here to our Shinnecock traditional territory. But when I was little, the stony shores used to, at low tide, you could just walk out. There was nothing but sandbars there. And so that's how I learned how to swim. I used to swim on my mother's back. And growing up, she used to she knew where all the sandbars were her entire life. So she could swim out at almost high tide or near to high tide and stand up somewhere in the bay because she knew where they were. So that's how I learned how to swim. And, being military, we moved from time to time to time. So I never forget one year we came back home and I was too big to go on her back. I mean, I could swim, but I wasn't my mom, I didn't have the guts like she did. Um, but I never forget, I stood on the shore and I watched my mom swim and never stand up because she couldn't find the sandbars. The sandbars were like gone, and right there, I mean, not only is just that oral history of knowing where these sandbars are, knowing where the eelgrass is, knowing where it floods in, knowing where, get the best cohogs, knowing where to go harvest things. But when the land and the water start to change, there's also perspective with that oral history. So, that's pretty dear to me, a little story there.
It is true. Those things that change, it changes our life ways. I know in our area, the elders often are talking about where the cranberries were. We still have places to gather cranberries in the wild, but there are so many other places that they talk about where they once were. And that's that changing of the land. So I'm wondering if you might share some of your favorite passages from the book and maybe give us some description of why they're important to you.
Yes, here's one right here. So this passage is actually more in the introduction, and it's very simple, but it's something that I find myself saying a lot, like, and it's really like, it's hard to protect what you cannot recognize. Many people are aware of herbs and their healing properties, but are unable to identify them by sight. And we can take sage, for example. I don't know if you can see, but if I hold it up, I have some sage that, my friend has actually harvested and has gifted to me. But if people were to walk upon it, they probably wouldn't know what it is unless they go into Whole Foods now and it's wrapped in a bundle and it's in a plastic bag, or if it's all prettified. And I think that is a big cultural appropriation, but it's also, and I'm an activist, so I'm gonna use this word. It's a prostitution of our plants, and it hurts. In many ways, I can to see that without the education. So when people go hiking and they're walking along the woods and all these different kinds of things, they're just walking by such sacred medicines. And a lot of times too, you know um for example, mullein, right? Mullein is that plant that literally almost grows in everybody's yards if you live in the Northeast, period. You can drive down Route 2, go into the Pequot Museum, and off of the side of the road there are mullein plants probably the size of me. I know because I have pulled my car over many times and have gotten some. But those plants in itself, especially when COVID came, everybody was buying up all the tea off of the grocery store and dandelion tea and all that kind of stuff. It's like, but you got everything right in your backyard. So it's not sometimes until people recognize what it looks like in its life form They know what it looks like in a tea box because the tea box says mullein, it says dandelion, it says burdock root, it, has all that stuff in there. But you may not know, like when you're walking and you're on a nice little trail there, there is some there. And so I wanted this, that's my favorite passage of the book. Because it kind of does stop people in their place. And that is hard for people to kind of swallow because it is the truth. Yeah.
Any other favorite passages that you wanted to share or pictures from your book?
I think that that's all I have for now.
Okay.
As far as yeah, if you guys want to get the book, well, actually, you know what? I have a contents here.
Yep.
The content is so there are 50 plant medicines. Some of them are, there might be a little bit more detail in others than there are in some. But here are pretty much all the plants that I have chose to talk about. And you can find the book right there on moxq2consulting.com. But I think, yeah, that's pretty much it there.
Okay, so given, you speak to yourself as an activist too, so I think this will tie in nicely. Given conversations around monuments, land back, protests, action at the Capitol, pandemics, police violence, how does your work speak to these pressing issues?
The book itself or just work in general?
Both, actually.
Well, I will have to say that I am in our culture, we say the red road. So I walk a red road at a pretty young age. I've been walking a red road at a young age since my 20s. That's not always easy, given the oppression, given the trauma and all those different kinds of things. So everything in my path, I try to just be guided by Creator. So if that is, creating a business, writing a book, showing up at the Capitol, showing up at the UN, supporting some of my relatives as they are, trying to stop pipelines, being there for some of the whales that have beached themselves as they are dying on our Shinnecock shores. Whatever it is that Creator is asking me to do, I just make sure that I keep myself in a clean mind and a clean body. So therefore, I'm just prepared for it. So I feel like that's kind of what really, where it shows in my book, because I'm able to actually verbally express myself about all of that. Whether it's about sage, we just kind of discussed sage, whether it's about, I have some sweetgrass here, which is something that I have been spending a lot of time with during the COVID, just to, bring in the good, and just to smell sweetgrass and just be closer to, Mother Earth, because it, from what I've taught, it represents Mother Earth's hair. And then to also spend time to soak it and braid it and gift it and, those different types of things. I feel like I put all of that into what I'm writing. And that is something that's felt. I know that a lot of people were spending more time outdoors. And I was like, well, if I can't necessarily, and during that time, we weren't doing plant identification walks because of COVID restrictions. So I was like, you know what? Well, if I can create like a really cool guide that has some photos, if people are taking family trips or, just a lunch break and just wanted to go to a park, they had something with them. But not only just they just have whatever it is I'm talking about, but they had my prayers, they had my good intentions, they had the photos of me actually braiding the sweetgrass. They have all that in that book. So that also helps them to connect with those plants. So that's, I guess, my way of being an activist in a digital world.
I love that. I think that activism, takes many forms, and the education that this book gives is a way. It's also an activism because it's teaching, but also providing knowledge that's beyond the literal, this is this plant, but how it affects you, mind, body, and spirit. I'm wondering if you would like to share a little bit more on how you would like this writing that you're doing, and the work that's connected to this writing, the literal harvesting and foraging for these amazing plant materials, to impact the community, the Native community specifically, but the community at large as well.
Well, it's really interesting how this whole journey has evolved. You all reached out to me, and you guys were the first, I feel like, yeah, February 7th, sometime in February, you all reached out to me after seeing some of the advertisement. I don't think my book was even launched yet, because it was before that. And it was like, this has all been, just as I go, like I said, whatever creator's like, okay, turn left, turn right. I'm not questioning what's down the path. I just know that it's going to be okay. And so when you reached out to me, I was still in a very learning, how do you promote a digital book during the COVID, all those different kinds of things. And the way it's been evolving now, it started out by just me gifting medicine boxes, right? Of medicines that I foraged over the summer last year and sent them out between October and December and January. Then the book, now, talking about the book, now plant identification walks, audio tour at some museums. What I really hope to do for the Native community is really inspire the young. Inspire the young. This new generation of young people, they're very holistic, extremely. They don't drink regular milk. They do almond milk. They don't even do soy. They're really getting back to a very holistic way of living. And I'm talking about the generation younger than me. I'm talking about the ones that are like still kind of in high school, just hitting 21. I'm not going to say my age, but I'm not in my 20s. But that generation is really who I want to key in on. That generation is on social media. So with my digital book being in that form where they could just sit with their headphones on and just scroll through my book and learn, they might be the ones that it's hard to bring them out to like a tribal gathering and all that kind of stuff, but they're gaining the knowledge from an oral perspective from their big cousin, from someone from a sister tribe. And not even just that, it might inspire them to do something, make bath soaps or something like that. But when that happens, then they are able to identify, and now they know how to protect our homelands. Now they know what their aunts and uncles and their older cousins have been laying their life on the line for. Now they're like, whoa, we have those medicines in those woods. We need to go there. Not that it's just our ancestral lands, but the fact that they're still living, the earth is alive, and that's something that the more people can recognize that, the more they will try to do everything to save her. And the same thing with the community at large. 80% of the global biodiversity is what we, I think, believe have left. And more than 25% of that is held tenure by Indigenous people. And then we make up what? Just a little shy of 2% of the human population. That's a lot of weight on our shoulders. That's a lot. So not only is investing in Indigenous communities monetarily, physically, or whatever that looks like, doing business with nonprofits and things like that, you are actually investing in your environment when you invest in Indigenous communities. But if people don't realize what's in the environment, then they also don't care sometimes. So it's really just a circle, but my real focus is the plants. And I've been seeing a big, huge change in behavior in the world, I feel like, during COVID, because people have been really waking up. So I hope that answers a bit of your question there. I get passionate, get a little work.
Well, we love that passion for sure. I'm wondering if you might want to give us a little deep dive into a couple of the plants that you've spoke about in your book, that, to give a little tantalizer for people in the audience that are curious. Because I think, there's recognizing a plant And there's even knowing a little bit about its uses, but there's this intersection of the traditional ways of knowing about a plant that I don't think the audience necessarily has had a lot of experience with. So I'm wondering if you might share a couple of those, you know.
Okay. Alrighty. So I have a couple. Instead of, I'll just do it where I have it here as opposed to going to the plants are right here, so I wouldn't ignore them, right? I'll start off with talking about what do you call it? It's in my hand. Um, Milkweed. I'm like milkweed, and I have some dog bane over there, but in the actual form. So if I were to put this up, people would be like, "Oh, that's not a plant." You know what I mean? This is an unfinished bag that I've been working on. I'm not going to say how long. I just, during the winter time, I sit and I watch Netflix. I just add something that I've just incorporated in my life, right? So this is a woven bag. This is actually something I worked on years ago. And as it gets to the top, you can see I kind of get better and better. But this milkweed, for those that may not realize, most people, when they think of milkweed, they think about the pods on the top. And they're like, how do you make that out of that? Well, it's really the stalk of the milkweed itself that has the fibers within it. And those stalks, are harvested at a certain time of year, which is around the fall when they begin to die. And then once they kind of begin to die, you're able to kind of break off the bark around it. And inside of it has this very silky fiber. And so that's kind of like, there's the fall of harvesting it and breaking it off. And then the winter time is when you actually turn it into that fibrous kind of material, if you will, and you splice everything together. It is not the most coolest thing to do. It's definitely something that our ancestors sat around, like the women would gather around and literally just do that kind of all winter. And the next thing you know, you have all this cordage. So it's one of our cordage plants. And those cordage plants, they can be dyed, and so when the springtime comes around, there's plenty of berries, there's plenty of not quite berries, strawberry is kind of the first berry, but you have different types of berries and different ochres. And I like to experiment with things. I think it's not really a wrong or right way to do things. I think it's all about the artistry. And just knowing what that plant does. Black walnut is something that I've done a lot of different things with paint for my outfit, whether it's also for my face, for ceremony, and then also sometimes to just kind of make it very sooty if you want to. But I would just like to say milkweed is like one of those plants, right? That's very important to us. And we also know that most people call it, I think a lot of horticulturists say butterfly weed. Is what they kind of refer to that milkweed as, because the butterflies do like it. And it is important because the butterflies are very important to our world. So the more we can preserve the milkweed, the more butterflies we will have, the more pollination that we'll have, and it'll just be a lot more healthier for the air and stuff that we breathe. So I don't know if that helped with because I'm like, that's just one plant. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's great to share some of the elements of what the plants can be used for. So feel free, if there's others in front of you, to share a couple more.
Oh yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to see if I can pan my little camera here. So I have a little setup, you all, here, of just different plants. But I have some cedar here. It's kind of dried out. I have like this little mat that I dry things on. It just depends. Cedar is an amazing plant. We use it in ceremonies, for different types of things, but it's definitely a very cleansing plant, cleansing for the body, cleansing for the mind, cleansing for the emotion, and cleansing for the spirit as well. So cedar can be put in a bath. If you ever get like really sick and feverish, and cedar has a way of drawing out those toxins, like really drawing out those toxins. When I was doing the mosquito boxes, I made a bath tea. So with the bath tea, you literally can just boil all of the different herbs in a pot. But let's just say cedar, for example. Let's say you're really, really sick, or someone has a fever, or just isn't really feeling good, or maybe your emotions are just like out of sync, and Mercury's in retrograde, and it's happening, and all that kind of stuff. If you take some cedar and you boil it, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can put your face over it and just, put the your towel above you and just really, and it'll draw everything out. Or you can actually take that cedar, boil it, and then what I do is strain it out, and that water that's left from that cedar, pour it in your bathtub. Because now that's also going to help literally rid all the toxins from your body, from your feet to your head to your back to your legs, your chest. And then sometimes what I do when there's something, because our homes, right? Homes can have a way of lingering energy, or just lingering something. Maybe you've been going through something and now you're having a good day, but that's still in the house. Cedar is a way to, you can put that in a pot and let that boil. And what I do is I walk around my house 4 times. You know what I mean? I open up the windows, and it's just really just cleansing that energy, that cedar, and the smell of fresh cedar is just nothing better than that. Um, but the oil from the cedar too, bugs don't like it, which is why there's cedar boxes. And I think I have this little thing here is what I have, a blend of tea that I've made. That's cedar, so it's like nice and fresh. But the oil from a cedar tree, what I was told, and I always say that what I'm taught, because I don't ever want to say that this is what it is, right? This is oral history and it's my perspective. But what I was always taught is that the oil, the same oil that's in the cedar tree, or similar, or almost same oil that's in a cedar tree. If you've ever seen an eagle or a bird of prey, specifically like a hawk, like, pick at its tail, it's not that there's something in there. They're actually taking the oil from its tail and cleaning its feathers. And it's like the same oil that's in the cedar tree that's in that tail. So it's very similar. It actually helps to clean it out. So there's cedar and there's milkweed.
That's
Chicky, I believe. Mhm.
So, are there other things on your table in front that you haven't shared with the audience?
Yes, let's see, what do I have? I have some tobacco here. Um, it's very fresh, real Rustica tobacco. Let's see if I can hold up a little leaf here. This was gifted to me from a Nipmuc friend of mine. He grows tobacco, and he gifted me some things. And when we ship things back and forth, whether it's an outfit that I've made, or something that he's made, we always put in extra little medicines, right? So he had given me some tobacco that he's grown. And tobacco is, it's interesting because that activism topic starts to come in when we talk about tobacco. I know I can't speak for the Narragansetts, but I know that the Narragansetts have a very historic fight in tobacco in the most recent years. And the same thing with us as Shinnecox, as we are, we have to pay for taxes, and there's all of this. But tobacco has always been something that we've used. And it's always something that I like to say we are now renatriating. We're taking it back, we're reclaiming that. And so when you take this tobacco and you mix it with another kind of medicine, it's considered kinnikinnick. It's a mixture. And we have different pipes that we use and smoke in that, because and what I've been taught is that when you smoke that, you're inhaling it, and when you release it, your prayers are put into the atmosphere. They're put into the world, where creator and Katonkatuk can actually take your prayers. And when we do it collectively, it's very strong. So, when we come together, we all take different bits of tobacco, and sometimes you put it in the fire, you put it in there collectively, because our collective prayers is really what holds the power. So that Rustica tobacco is not the same tobacco as the tobacco that Pocahontas, essentially taught John Rolfe to grow, and they experimented with it. Nicotina tobacco, I think is what it's called. The Rustica tobacco has a lot of nitrogen, so you don't grow a lot. You don't grow like massive fields and then your crops die. You only have like a small little area, and it doesn't really grow as past your knee almost. It's very, very short. And that's what that particular one is. So that's my tobacco there.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if you might want to share any of your future projects or goals that you have on the horizon.
Yeah, I actually, let me share my screen really quick. I did add it in here just real quick. So I have, this can be now announced. I helped to curate an audio tour. So who knew that this was going to be something out of the book here? Okateu, which is the audio tour called Plants of the Earth at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. So if you ever go to New York City between June 24th and November 7th, you can go and check it out. And it's an audio tour. So just how I pretty much talked about the plants, you can hear it with at least 15 of the plants there. So there's that here. Definitely go check it out there. And as far as what do I have on the horizon? Well, I've been doing a couple of canoe tours in Long Island, paddle tours. I've partnered with the Southampton History Museum and Mosquito Consulting to do canoe tours around Conscious Point, which Conscious Point is known as the first point of contact in Long Island, New York. So if you ever want to come over to Long Island, take a ferry, it'll just be a day trip, you know. We're doing one actually this Saturday, and then we'll have one in August, and then we're doing one in September. But I am working on a second edition for my book. I think that's probably the big thing to let everybody know. When I can sit down and write, I want to do a printed book. So it'll still be 50 Plants, Indigenous Oral History and Perspective, second edition, but I'm really going to elaborate more on the plants, maybe have some more photos, go into a little deeper dive, and then it'll be a printed version. So if you are interested in that, you definitely just need to subscribe to Mosquito Consulting. So it'll be before the end of the year. It'll be a great, winter solstice gift and Nanawa gift.
Fantastic. And for those that would like to learn more, you mentioned it. I'm assuming that Haley, our Tamaquag Tech, will put the links to Mosquito Consulting and the actual 50 Plant Medicines ebook, which is wonderful, by the way. I downloaded it and have enjoyed it immensely. And you know, we're talking about literature and culture, and certainly in this 50 Plant Medicines, it's full of cultural knowledge, specifically about the plants themselves, but also about the traditional uses of those plants, which is so holistic and inclusive of all of our cultural elements, which is wonderful. So I'm just wondering, as we're thinking about literature, what else you might be reading about?
That's right. And I should have had it's on my bookshelf over there. So I typically read a lot of books at one time. If anybody's seen that documentary on Bill Gates, he like walks around with like this tote bag full of books, and he literally reads them all at one time. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not that hardcore, but I'm reading a couple. So I've been reading The Native New Yorker by Eric Richards. And I also recently, what I have been reading is called A Message to the Millennials from my really close friend, brother Riza Islam. And that's kind of what I'm reading now. Those two.
Maybe folks will be sharing what they're reading also in the chat, because you know there's so many interesting books to read, and you learn so much from everyone's varying perspectives. And so I certainly appreciate your perspectives and your amazing words tonight. I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add Before we go to Q&A, people can be popping questions in the chat. And in a few minutes, we'll give people a chance if they'd like to do it live. That's okay as well.
I would just really like to add that, as a young person, I have worked in various different museums. I've worked at our museum right out of college, Shinnecock Museum, and I worked at Plymouth Plantation for a couple of years, went into corporate America, and then I worked at Mashantucket Pequot Museum. And, one thing that I love about the Tamaqua Museum, because there's been different partnerships throughout that experience, right? But I was working as a museum employee. I love to see that all of the work that's still happening. And I love getting all the emails and just keeping updated on the newsletter and just, all of that, because it's so important that we preserve, our artifacts, and our family heirlooms, but the land and the history. And I feel like Tamaqua Museum has that like family feel. It doesn't have that very corporate kind of museum feel. It has that very like home kind of feel, the old like museum, old Indian museum kind of feel. And I love that. And I just feel very honored that I was reached out to be a part of this series. I was like, oh my goodness. See, this is my first time being an author, so I just want to say thank you so much for that. Thank you to Bootney.
Kanupiam, you're welcome. We love to uplift Indigenous people and Indigenous voice, and this is a perfect example. This project, hopefully will inspire other people in our communities. We're really trying to encourage Indigenous authors. We have a lot to say and a lot of voice to share. And this is a perfect example of someone taking that initiative and actually putting it to print so that you can explore those elements. I think that you have gorgeous earrings on that are plant medicines in themselves.
Yes, they're birch bark. A little piece of wampum here.
They're gorgeous.
You.
Porcupine quills.
Yes.
So, I think that that's one of the things that you're speaking to a lot in this book is how we look at these plants. They're medicines, but they're also connected to us in so many different holistic ways, useful ways, whether that's making the mashoon or the canoe, to medicinal ways, to spiritual ways. Those are all like just truly amazing ways of knowing, ways of thinking. So I'm trying to, some people are mentioning their favorite books. Some are mentioning Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerman. That was part of our book club with Silver Moon LaRose this past year. It was something that people really talked about quite a bit. Others are mentioning Newcomb's Wildlife Flower Guide, which is a lot of fun. We've also got some guides that we're using on our phones now and again. There is Plant Net, and I forget what this one's called. Didn't want to open. I forgot there was another one, but there's different apps that can help you.
I used to Picture This app.
Yeah, Picture This, I think is it. So I was using Picture This on occasion, but I've been using PlantNet lately.
Okay.
So that's just another tool. And someone's mentioning they've been using Google Lens for quick plant ID. It's helpful if we have when you really think but you want to double check.
Yeah, I use it too. I am no expert.
Yeah, so there's some amazing things. So I'm going to check the chat and see if there's some questions here. There's some beautiful words. This is a note to you. I took note of the plant summer grape in the table of contents on Chenae's book. I'm curious to know how to distinguish the species summer grape, Vitis, oh good Lord, Estivalis. I don't know how, a little too much Greek there for me. From the other two wild grape species common in our area, the fox grape and the riverside grape. If Chenae will be covering this in next week's TEK field trip, I'm happy to wait until then. So
Maybe I will do a little homework, but there's still a lot, like I said, I still have a lot to learn. I'm still a young adult. So there's still a lot of things I have to learn. So I am not always distinct on too many of the variations of things, but I definitely, well, I know the summer grape has been very popular on Shinnecock this year, like just everywhere. So I don't know if that's like a whole Northeastern thing, or some years things are stronger than others. The mullen is everywhere, but the summer grape is just like everywhere now.
it does feel as though after COVID, things have revived themselves in a way that they hadn't been before. And I don't know if that's because people were in their homes and in their yards, and people were cleaning areas and cleaning out, because we've also been having a lot more plants that have been more visible and accessible in our own yard. My personal yard, but also in the Tamaqua space. It's been really lovely. So this is from Janelle. She says, thank you so much for this talk. I am a settler on Mohegan land. I would love to hear your thoughts on settlers foraging, if you're willing to share. I follow the best environmental practices I know in terms of not harvesting endangered plants and making sure I don't overharvest a population so that they continue to thrive. I also avoid harvesting sacred plants like cedar, sage, sweetgrass. Let's see if there's another question here. Are there ways I can be mindful of people whose land I'm on while engaging with the land?
Okay. That's a great question. I love when I get questions about, like, there's another question too. I'll kind of do both of them. Someone else was asking about, like, how can they support, these different types of things, right? One, it started with just asking like that. I'm one Native person. Um, I can't speak for all. I'm also Shinnecock, but I also come from a specific clan in Shinnecock, so we might have a whole different outlook sometimes, not completely different outlook, but than maybe my next door neighbor or our tribes across the water, right? But at the same time, this land is what we all have to live on. So the respect of the plant is the human respect for the plant. When it comes to that cultural connection, my biggest suggestion would be to make connection with the Mohegan people, make connection with the local indigenous peoples, because they might tell you about a specific area that is forbidden, right? Or a specific area that is a place where you go during this time or you don't go during this time. Plants also have a way of hiding themselves from you when you're trying to forage, because they are so sacred. So I think maybe developing that relationship with the local indigenous people is a great start as well to answer, I think, more of those questions. And then to tie into how to support, once again, too, like, different tribes are fighting for different things, right? In Shinnecock, we've been very loud, and that's something that I've been doing kind of on a national and international level about our desecration of our graves. That's continuously happening in the hills of Shinnecock, where they have $145 million estates for sale. That's like on purpose there. So sometimes that might be what Shinnecock is dealing with, but I know the Rosebud Sioux, they're showing up to the Carlisle Indian School between today and tomorrow to repatriate their remains for their ancestors. So there's very different uh, issues around sovereignty and land sovereignty, which are two different things as well. And I think that maybe, once again, creating that relationship with the local people, and whose land which you are on or visiting or working on, to see what initiatives can you support. Because sometimes it's, maybe they need extra blankets for the people that are on the front lines. Maybe they need you to show up with them in court. Maybe they need you to call the Senate. There's different types of things that can be done there.
I think Jamie has her hand up. Jamie, you're welcome to take your mute off and say hello.
Hi, Chenae.
Mhm.
I just wanted to say this has been really interesting to hear. And my question for you, Chenae, was how did you choose the 50 for your book? There's so many plants out there. I'm just wondering, how did you whittle it down to those 50, those first 50?
Well, I did a process of elimination, right? So there's some plants that I just do not talk about, you know,
Mhm.
because because they're that sacred, and there's this huge wave of psychedelics and all of this kind of stuff that's rolling into things. And there's a lot of plants that some people carry the knowledge of that we have to protect. So I wanted to really talk about what people might already familiar with. Like people know about dandelion, but they may not know all about dandelion. People have heard about sassafras, but they don't know the history of sassafras. So like I wanted to do something that people were familiar with, but then there's like skunk cabbage and staghorn sumac that like a lot of people just, oh, I see it, but I didn't know that that was staghorn sumac and tastes like lemonade and it's really good. So I kind of did like a process of elimination, really, to just say, okay, you can't talk about this, you cannot talk about that, definitely can't talk about that. Your elders would curse you out for doing that. You'd be getting phone calls from this tribe and that tribe saying, are you kidding? You told, and those plants, they're hidden in the woods for a reason,
Mhm.
you know where they are. But at the same time, like I said, I wanted to talk about what people are really focusing on, which is that sage, cedar, and sweetgrass, tulip poplar. And, so that's kind of how I did it. But I really did it on an Excel spreadsheet because I'm just OCD organized sometimes. And I just did it that way and said, okay, once you get to 50, or I just kept going, I just wrote everything. And then I was like, okay, take out until you have 50, because 50 just seems better than like 53 or, yeah, that's how I chose.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Good seeing you.
You too.
Thank you. So there's I think there's another question popping up. It says, where may we purchase your ebook again? So hopefully you can say it, and then we'll have Haley pop it back in the chat. Oh, there it is.
Yes. So you can actually go to, it's popped in the chat, but it's also on my website. So moxskiduconsulting.com, you can just go right there. You can also get it on Amazon. So I'm going to pop in the chat my Instagram handle if you all have Instagram or have access to it. But I have it on Amazon Kindle. So if you go to my Instagram, the link in my Instagram, it's in there. And stay tuned. So subscribe to the website and stay tuned for the printed book.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Is there anyone else that has a question? Double checking the chat that I didn't miss anybody.
This has been awesome.
This has been lovely. I'm looking forward to our hike next week, the traditional ecological knowledge hike, and we'll go a little farther. There's someone who's saying they're looking forward to the printed version as well in the future. And thank you from Jacqueline for sharing your wisdom and holding space for Mother Earth's gifts. Those are all lovely sentiments. And I also want to thank you so much tonight for sharing your perspectives on your experience with these 50 plant medicines, your cultural knowledge that you've shared, and your just grace and beauty in the way that you carry yourself. So I want to just thank you again so much for coming. I do want to give a couple of quick announcements. We are taking a break from our literature and culture author conversations for the month of August to let us kind of wind out in the summer and have a little break, but we'll be returning this fall in September, October, and November with new literature and culture author conversations. So keep an eye out on our website for that. We also, you can check out on our events page, tamaqua.museum.org/events for our upcoming programs. We're going to be back by popular demand. Christine Jones is going to come back on Friday, August 6th, I believe at 6 p.m. We haven't even posted it yet, so you're getting a sneak peek on the date for another traditional ecological knowledge walk. And she focuses on teas and tea making and the uses of those materials there. We, if you don't know, have our virtual honoring celebration, and we're hosting it live on YouTube Live on July 29th at 7 p.m. It is free, but you can register on our website, and we'll pop that in the link. It's tamaqua.org/honoring, I believe. And what else is going on? There's all kinds of things. So I want to thank our funders again, the Rhode Island Council on the Humanities, the Rhode Island Council on the Arts, USDA Rural Development, and New England Foundation for the Arts, and all of you, our generous donors who have supported Tamaqua Museum and helped us to thrive during this very unusual time we've all been living in. We are open again. You can come by the museum for drop-by visits on Wednesdays 10 to 5 and Saturdays 10 to 2. The other days by appointment for group tours and private tours. So we look forward to having you there, and you can support Native artists by supporting the Tamaqua Museum gift shop, virtual as well as in-store now, which you can also find on our website. So thank you all, Katabatash and Wuni Nukan. Have a wonderful night, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you again at